It's the second half of the 15th century. Medieval Japan is ruled by Ashikaga Yoshimasa, the 8th shogun of the Ashikaga shogunate, established more than 100 years earlier. Theoretically, it should be the emperor of Japan who holds the most important position, but this is not the case during the time of the shogunate. During the latter part of the 15th century, the emperor's influence is reduced to that of a symbolic authority. The emperor posed barely any threat to the military rule of the Ashikaga clan, who had by that time established their government in the imperial city of Kyoto. Initial appearances, however, can be deceiving. During the time of Yoshimasa, the heyday of the Ashikaga family was actually a thing of the past. On the surface, the shogunate still controlled the provinces of Japan through the hands of the shugo, regional governors serving on behalf of the shogun. But whole decades of succession troubles and early deaths had seriously undermined the power and influence of the central government. Frequent rebellions against the shogunate kept the local governors busy, but Yoshimasa's position was still relatively prestigious and respected. Far more than being a military leader, Yoshimasa was extensively engaged in cultural pursuits, popularizing poetry and tea ceremonies in his luxurious villa in the capital. The reign of Yoshimasa, the 8th shogun, did not do much to help stop the decay of the shogunate. Yoshimasa was aware that his traits were not necessarily among the most desired for a shogun, especially given the rising social unrest throughout the country he had to face. Having no heir, he convinced his younger brother, Yoshimi, to abandon his chosen life as a Buddhist monk in order to join the royal court at Yoshimasa's right hand, and, eventually, as the new shogun. After 5 years of informal takeover of administrative duties, Yoshimi was officially named successor. Yoshimasa's power transition plans went relatively smoothly until 1465, when his wife, Tomiko, somewhat unexpectedly gave birth to a son, Yoshihisa. The surprising event, the birth of a male heir, muddied Yoshimasa's succession plans, as Tomiko plotted to secure her son's birthrights. The upheaval eventually led to another succession crisis within the Ashikaga family, with Yoshimi retaining his position and quickly finding supporters willing to fight for his cause. Hosokawa Katsumoto, one of the deputies of the shogun, who always sympathized with the shogun's brother, decided to join Yoshimi's side and so endorsed his claim. Katsumoto was, however, in the midst of a local feud against another powerful nobleman, Yamana Sozen. These two noblemen actually fought for some years in another power struggle of yet another succession crisis within the Hatakeyama family. But for the sake of clarity, we won't dive too deeply into that conflict. Sozen carefully planned his steps, maneuvering in local politics to gain new allies until he was ready for a full-scale conflict. Soon, he eventually decided to join the side of the shogun's infant son, taking their local row to an entirely new level. Both the Yamana and the Hosokawa families gathered their vassals and relatives near Kyoto, preparing for an impending encounter. The incumbent shogun took some action to stop the madness, but despite him being quite an adequate politician, his waning authority proved his actions futile. War was imminent. Both sides managed to gather around 80,000 men each, but it was not until 1467 that the first skirmishes took place. Yamana burnt Hosokawa's mansion in Kyoto in a surprise attack, while Hosokawa replied with harassing Yamana's rice shipments. Many such events occurred during the course of the war, but with neither side able to gain an upper hand, the most ferocious fighting took place on the streets of Kyoto. The most visible result of these skirmishes was the change of the urban landscape as a rising number of buildings were turned into rubble. Soon, Yamana was reinforced by Ouchi Masahiro, Yamana's headstrong vassal, with another 20,000 troops. Parallel with the warfare in the Kyoto area, both leaders also fought on the political level. Hosokawa's efforts convinced both shogun and emperor to denounce the Yamana as rebels, as the latter captured the imperial palace. This was quite a serious blow, as any of Yamana's supporters then risked the danger of being declared a traitor. But Yamana Sozan, albeit with difficulty, retained his numbers, and the bloody stalemate lingered. In 1469, Shogun Yoshimasa officially named his son Yoshihisa his heir, finally fulfilling his wife's desire. In effect, the shogun's brother changed sides in a complicated string of events and became one of Yamana's chief generals. Even though it was the succession crisis which sparked the war, the major changes in the royal court didn't affect the fighting between the two influential clans or their vassals at all. It was a clear sign that the power of the Ashikaga shogunate had become very limited and war was basically out of their control. 4 more years of bloody skirmishes passed, with chaos spreading into the countryside of Japan. In 1473, both Katsumoto and Sozan died, both most likely of natural causes, but the exhausted clans didn't cease hostilities, and the war lasted for yet another 4 more years. Due to serious casualties on both sides and to Yoshimasa's efforts to convince belligerents to end the fighting, in 1477 the war came to an end. Some stubbornly refused to give up, like Yamana's vassal Ouchi Masahiro, who initially fought for Yoshihisa's cause. He eventually left Kyoto, but not before burning down his perimeter, the last part of the city remaining relatively unharmed. This war had no clear victor. The bled-out Hosokawa clan remained in Kyoto and had some influence on the young shogun Yoshihisa after his father officially abdicated, but the capital was nothing more than a pile of rubble. The Ashikaga shogunate prevailed, but was weaker than ever. Slowly, it was becoming obvious that the shogun had lost control over the capital, let alone the populous Japanese countryside, where local governors had more and more problems enforcing his law and orders. Although the fighting in Kyoto was over, the disturbed social order caused the unrest to spread to the rest of Japan. One of the bloodiest periods of Japanese history, the Sengoku Jidai, had begun.